Welcome to UFOs in a Strange Universe. I'm Ivanhoe Chapu. I'm 78 years old, and I've been studying UFOs and the paranormal since my first UFO sighting when I was 13 years old. I hope you enjoy my experiences and personal views on the strangeness of the UFO phenomenon in the following chapters of UFOs in a Strange Universe. The Paranormal, Aliens, and Ghosts. After living in Canada, Ohio, California, and Arizona, my parents moved to Mississippi, where I was a fish out of water. I went to school from the last half of the 10th grade to a couple of months in the 12th grade. It's a long story, but I decided I didn't like a school with 91 students starting in the 1st grade to the 12th. My graduating class would have been 4 kids, and there was a lack of qualified teachers who wanted to give me credit for taking Biology 2 over again, just so I could get the credits to graduate. They also had a French teacher named Ms. Gooch, who I took a class from, that said she would have failed me if I didn't already speak fluent French. French sounded really goofy with her Mississippi accent. So, with only 2 months into my 12th grade, I quit school to embark on what was then called a gypsy trip. Lots happened from the time I was 17 to when I was 21. I described this tumultuous time in my book, Where's My Mom and Dad? During this gypsy trip, I had gone back to California, where San Francisco had no mercy on hippie-looking kids like me. I left San Francisco with a bad taste in my mouth, no pun intended. The hippie lifestyle was not for me. After being thrown in jail twice, I then went back in Mississippi, deep in the Bible Belt, where Jehovah's Witnesses would stop by every weekend and knock on my door. I was always up for a good time and spent many Friday and Saturday nights smoking pot and dropping a hit of acid now and then. After several party nights, I decided I didn't want to get stoned anymore. I had spent the whole night cleaning up the beer bottles, ashtrays, spilled drinks all over the house, and wanted a clean, clear view of the world. I completely cleared my drug-infested brain and decided next time Jehovah's Witnesses came by, I was going to listen to what they have to say. A very sweet lady named Rita came right on her scheduled rounds on a Sunday afternoon. This time, I opened the door to listen to what she had to say. We studied the Bible for at least 3 years afterward, putting on my Sunday go-to-meeting clothes, and went with my first wife and my 2 kids to the Kingdom Hall every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. After the Sunday meeting, it was out pounding on doors. I can't say it was easy, going knocking on doors when so many Baptists held different slants about the interpretation of the Bible. In those 3 years, I became an ordained minister and learned a lot about the Bible. I also told to get rid of my TV, stopped celebrating Christmas and Easter, stopped riding my motorcycle, and held off with the F-bombs whenever I could. I stopped going to the Kingdom Hall when one of the churchgoers stole some very personal items from me. Afterward, I became more of an agnostic than an atheist for about 30 years. I always retained interest in the Bible and religion in general, but not from a religious viewpoint. It was more from an ontological or historical point of view. I was interested in things like the Shroud of Turin, how the Medici family got so rich, and reading biographies of famous people like Michelangelo and Giordano Bruno, both of which felt the wrath of the Catholic Church. One was held in house arrest for the rest of his life, and the other, well, let's say he had better days as he was burned at the stake for voicing his religious beliefs and that the Earth was not the center of the universe. My interest in aliens and UFOs never left me. I never had a UFO sighting in Mississippi, although I always defended the good people I made friends with when Mississippi was badmouthed. I felt like aliens were more interested in California, Arizona, Nevada, New York, and military bases. We had moved to Bell, California, and rented the same house my mom and dad had rented when I was in high school many years before. It was a spooky 2-story house when an elderly couple that lived upstairs had passed away. They lived there when my mom and dad had rented it. It was here that my ex-wife experienced an entity speaking through her. It wasn't a scary entity. He called himself Psi-E, and we recorded 36 hours over a 2-year period of him talking on death, life, extraterrestrials, God, Lemuria, and a host of other subjects. I still have those recordings. One morning, I woke up to find myself walking around in our side yard. I didn't realize that my body was still in bed, sleeping next to my wife. I did notice that the grass was greener than it should have been. I noticed that there were glistening dewdrops with rainbow colors on the grass, and that I could hear every little pebble embedded in the street as cars rode over them. Then I noticed a huge spider web with a large black and orange spider at the center of the web. I thought this was such a beautiful spider. Now, I hate spiders. Their webs are annoying, and the fact that some are poisonous gives me the creeps. However, this one was absolutely beautiful. Then it dawned on me that I must be naked, because I always sleep in the buff. When I realized this, I woke up in my bed, staring at the walls. I thought to myself, was I dreaming? It was all so real. Then I went to the window to check it out. To my amazement, there was the spider web, the spider, the dewdrops on the grass, which was nowhere as green as I saw it, and the angle of the sun just as it was when I was walking out there. About a week later, the same thing happened. I was again out in the side yard. This time I thought to myself, I need to verify that I'm actually outside in the yard, without my main component, my body. I then took note of a telephone pole guy wire that went from midpoint of the telephone pole to the sidewalk that I had never noticed before. There were avocado trees there, with avocados hanging from their branches. I made a count of the avocados on a particular branch. There were 7. I again woke in my bed and went to the window. There was the guy wire just as I had seen it, and there were 7 avocados on that branch. This was not the end of the story. It was about 2 to 3 weeks later when I woke finding myself about a foot from the ceiling. It was about 7:00 a.m. I looked to my left toward the bedroom closet door and saw the top of the door when normally I would see the doorknob. This was quite curious. I decided to look around, then look downward. What I saw was me and my wife lying there, asleep. The strangest thing was that I could still see the ceiling while also observing myself in bed. I not only had normal peripheral vision, but also 360-degree vision. I got excited. When I did, I slammed back into my body with a violent jerking motion. This woke my wife, who then asked, "What happened? Did someone just break in?" To which I responded, "No, I was just floating up near the ceiling." My wife just rolled on her side and went back to sleep. I passively entertained the idea of the existence of some form of higher power during that time. It wasn't until my dad passed away and later my mom passed that I regained a serious interest in spiritual matters. Then in 2006, shortly after my mom passed, I had a paranormal experience that is still unexplainable. My secretary and I were working after everyone had left the building when I heard something making a slapping noise in the office at the back of the building. I thought my secretary, Rin, was doing something in that office. When she came around the corner of my office, she looked at me like she'd seen a ghost, which wasn't far from what happened next. Walking toward the back office, she clutched my arm with her nails digging into my skin. When we got to that office, we saw a 3x4 piece of 1/4 inch thick foam core board hitting the concrete wall of the building and the back of a bookcase. It was violently striking the wall and the bookcase back and forth for about a full minute, then it slowed and stopped. Rin and I looked at each other in disbelief. There were no open windows in that office, and there was no air movement. Foam core is not magnetic, and there was nothing moving but the board. A week later, about the same time, a bumping noise was coming from upstairs. It was different. The stairs to this mezzanine started in the warehouse up to a 2,000 square foot storage area. So we started to go up the stairs. When Rin saw that a bookcase was rocking back and forth, hitting the wall, she hightailed it back down to the warehouse floor. I continued to climb the stairs. When I got to the top of the stairs, the bookcase stopped rocking. I walked over to the bookcase, and there, on the floor, laid my dad's .410 shotgun and his 12-gauge shotgun, which had been leaning against the corner of the bookcase and the wall. To this day, I need to remind myself that these things really happened. I have photos of this in my book, Where's My Mom and Dad? It was about a week after the bookcase event that 3 of my employees saw what they thought was something that caught fire. In the same office, Rin and I saw the foam core board beating against the wall. I had gone to see a client when this event took place. It looked like a cloud of fog dangling above a desk in the corner of that office. Then, it began to move across the room. John, one of my employees, took out his cell phone and snapped several photos of it as it went over a table and lodged itself in front of a hutch that had photos of my mom and dad's wedding pictures. These paranormal events turned the tide for me that something paranormal, or at least ghostly, had happened. I didn't know how to interpret what had transpired with all these weird events. The 3 events in the house at 6503 Wilcox, Bell, California, and the 3 events in the building at 13701 Gramercy Place in Gardena, California. I just know it happened. I was always interested in the paranormal, ghosts, UFOs, and had read Dr. Raymond Moody's book, Life After Life in 1975. These events renewed my interest in life after death, especially after my mom passed away. I began reading several books on dying and near-death experiences. I took a pragmatic approach, studying only cases of veridical NDE experiences. These are people who see or do things during their near-death experience that can be verified by living people that can attest to what the person saw or did when they were on the other side. I wasn't interested in the tunnels, seeing dead relatives, angels, or anything that someone with any form of imagination could make up. I only studied veridical experiences that were verifiable by living people. I took a similar approach with the subject of UFOs. I kept my peripheral vision on anything that moved, whether in the sky or anywhere close to the ground. Up to and into my 20s, in my mind, my only belief in UFOs were my sightings I personally witnessed. I was skeptical of theories and hypotheses, but more skeptical of people like Mick West, Robert Schaefer, and Philip Klass. I learned to despise these people who tried their best to debunk all UFO sightings. They either lied to discredit UFO witnesses, or they were paid by some government organization to do so. For decades, I knew that someday the subject of UFOs would become mainstream and the world would know that we are not alone. And, as of 2026, we're almost, but not quite there. Up until my 40s, I believed UFOs were piloted by extraterrestrial beings that have somehow crossed the threshold of time travel and the space-time barrier of the speed of light, using some form of space-time travel. I was 42 when I watched Bob Lazar's video called The Lazar Tapes and excerpts from the government Bible. This video is still available for viewing on YouTube. In this video, Bob Lazar describes how their craft were able to produce tremendous amounts of energy by transmuting antimatter into electrical energy that powered anti-gravity pods. Many videos have been made that erroneously state that element 115 was the material that produced anti-gravity faster than light travel. However, this is not the case. Element 115 is bombarded with protons, which release antimatter particles down a tuned tube so they don't come in contact with matter. These particles enter a gaseous material that turns the antimatter into nothing more than electrical energy, which is then directed to the anti-gravity pods mounted underneath the floor of the craft. The real secret is not only in producing antimatter, but what's in this gaseous liquid that can turn antimatter into electricity. I've never heard anyone talk about this anomalous gaseous liquid, except Bob Lazar. It's a bit more complicated than this. However, Bob's video explains this in great detail. So it's a tremendous amount of electrical power, not element 115, that creates the gravitational energy. In my mind at that time, extraterrestrials came from out there, somewhere, and they were basically fleshy, food-eating beings like us who were exploring their domain, the universe, like scientists and researchers. They were abducting people and cows to learn how life on Earth works. I didn't believe they were malevolent or benevolent. They were most likely just traveling the cosmos, learning stuff. In the 1970s, the term interdimensional began to gain traction. When I first heard this, I was skeptical but open-minded. This is when I put 2 plus 2 together. I thought of abductions where people were taken through walls, through closed windows, and up through ceilings of their houses. I was not convinced of these cases until I read about one abductee that was returned through his closed window. He had stepped in some mud before his return. He first believed the entire abduction was either a bad dream or the result of sleep paralysis until he went outside and saw his muddy footprints that led directly to the closed window he had been taken through. This was not simply a closed window, but a picture window that actually did not open. I don't know or understand why he was not levitated through the mud, but this story opened my views on interdimensional beings. With this new view of aliens, I revised my thinking. What if interdimensional beings, with abilities that appear paranormal, do not travel like three-dimensional beings? If these beings are able to manipulate matter, able to pass through solid walls, is it possible that they can also appear in different form if they wished? Could this support the words of Heisenberg when he said that the universe is stranger than we can think? I'm not someone that simply goes with the flow, but with new evidence that makes sense, I can turn the corner quickly. If I can have consciousness outside my body and ghosts can manifest themselves in front of my employees, I would keep close tabs on any new developments concerning the interdimensional hypothesis. It was in 1989 when the story of Linda Napolitano's story broke of her abduction that was witnessed by 23 people, including the Secretary General of the United Nations, Javier Perez de Cuellar. This case was thoroughly investigated by UFO researcher Bud Hopkins. In 2024, Linda Napolitano sued Netflix for misrepresenting her in their film, The Manhattan Alien Abduction. She described the aliens as having black eyes and were allegedly able to communicate with her telepathically. They told her in a language she didn't know but understood to be quiet. Then she wound up unable to move as a blue beam lifted her into the night sky and onto their ship. Once aboard their craft, these beings performed a series of unspecified experiments on her and inserting a metallic device in her nose before returning her. Linda had never changed her story in 38 years and swears that it was true. David Michael Jacobs was an associate professor of history at Temple University for nearly 4 decades before his retirement a few years back. Tenured in 1981, he taught a variety of classes with a focus on 20th century American history, including one that's made him infamous: unidentified flying objects in American society. He states they take people through walls, windows, and ceilings. During this part of the abduction scenario, the UFOs, the aliens, and the abductees have been rendered unseeable. This is advanced technology at work. If this is true, I must ask, is it advanced technology or manipulation of matter by way of some interdimensional psychic ability? With many instances of people claiming to have been passed through matter, I can't fully dismiss their claims. And John Mack, the famous Harvard psychiatrist, started theorizing about the purpose of the aliens' visits in his writing. He stated that perhaps they were sent by some greater creative intelligence to expand human consciousness and help us not only to evolve, but also help us understand we are all intricately connected and need to take better care of our most precious gift, the planet Earth. Mack worked with abductees, releasing his second and more openly spiritual book on the phenomena, Passport to the Cosmos, in 1999. He also began a professional interest in the survival of consciousness after death, until his own tragic passing in 2004 when he was hit by a car after looking the wrong way while trying to cross the road in London. Many UFO researchers have associated alien visitations with the paranormal. I can understand why. Some individuals who report alien abduction experiences also report developing paranormal abilities, such as healing, clairvoyance, or increased psychic energy. Since the universe is not only stranger than we imagine, and therefore it's stranger than we can imagine, then what might be the connection with the paranormal and UFOs? Could some government officials have made a connection between demons and UFOs to where these officials have discovered something that terrified them? Or in some relevance at least, between the paranormal and UFOs? I would guess that religious beliefs are a major reason for UFO secrecy, along with the desire to gain technological advantage over potential enemies. Fear might just be the driving force for keeping knowledge of UFOs secret. It's my belief that fear of what's behind the UFO secrecy is waning as more knowledge of their existence is being revealed. There is evidence that some UFOs are extraterrestrial beings made of solid matter. Some are interdimensional who have abilities that defy physics as we know. Some are extradimensional also with special abilities. Some are spiritual beings, able to transcend through different dimensions with relative ease. There's also the idea that thought can manifest beings from the id, the inner mind. I will expound on these ideas in a following video.